They say the unmarked territory has no ruler. They say it because saying otherwise would require them to explain how a single female shifter, a Felid, a creature whose entire bloodline was supposed to have been erased from the world 2 generations ago, managed to hold 40 square miles of contested borderland against 4 wolf clans, 3 mercenary guilds, and 1 particularly ambitious vampire consortium without losing so much as a single acre. It is easier to call it lawless. It is easier to pretend the stories are exaggeration, folklore, the kind of tale that frightened mothers tell children who wander too close to the tree line at dusk. It is easier, and it is a lie, and everyone who lives within 100 miles of that territory knows it. Her name is Seraphine Voss, and she is the most dangerous thing breathing in the northern borderlands, and she has not asked for your fear, your admiration, or your acknowledgement. She has asked, in the only language she has ever trusted, which is the language of demonstrated consequence, to be left alone. The territory she governs is not governed by proclamation or throne, or the elaborate hierarchical theater that the wolf clans have spent centuries constructing to justify why some creatures are born to command and others to kneel. It is governed by something older and simpler and far more honest, by the understanding, written in the memory of every predator who has tested those borders and retreated bleeding, that the Panther, who lives at the heart of this land, is not a ruler who can be negotiated with, replaced, or overthrown. She is a fact. She is a constant. She is, for the 600 souls who have found their way to her territory, seeking nothing more than the radical luxury of being left in peace, the closest thing to safety that this unforgiving world has ever offered them. Seraphine herself would find that description sentimental and probably irritating. She would tell you, in the flat, precise way she has of delivering information that she has decided you require, that she holds the territory because it is strategically defensible, because she has spent 6 years building a network of knowledge and consequence that makes aggression against her borders more costly than any potential reward, and because she has made very clear to every alpha, warlord, and ambitious second who has ever looked at her land with acquisitive eyes exactly what the price of their ambition would be. She would not tell you about the healer she carried 3 miles through winter forest when the woman's leg was broken and she could not walk, and she would not mention that she sat outside the woman's shelter for 2 days afterward to make sure no fever came. She would not tell you about the child she found alone at the eastern border at age 7, or the fact that the child is now 14 and calls the territory home, or that Seraphine has, in the way of creatures who will not use the word love because it feels like handing someone a weapon, made herself responsible for that child's continued existence in a way that goes considerably beyond territorial obligation. She is precise and cold, and she does not sleep as many hours as she should, because she is always paying attention. This is the inheritance of her bloodline, the gift and the curse of the Voss Felids, who once ranged across 3 territories before the wolf clans decided that range was a threat, and that threats should be eliminated. The ability to hold an entire landscape in her mind at once, to know the pattern of every creature within her borders, to sense deviation from that pattern the way a spider senses disruption in its web. Her mother had it. Her grandmother had it. The others of her line who died in what the clans now carefully refer to as the border consolidation of the Third Age had it. And it did not save them, because you can know that something is coming and still be unable to stop it when it comes with enough force and enough political cover and the deliberate institutional certainty that no one important will object. Seraphine knows this. She has built her entire existence around the gap between knowing and preventing, around the question of how much knowing is enough to matter. She does not have an answer. She has 6 years of data, a territory full of refugees, and the particular sharp-edged piece of someone who has survived things that were meant to kill her and decided, with considerable deliberateness, to make that survival as inconvenient as possible for everyone who thought she would simply disappear. She is 29 years old, and she has been alone for most of them, and she has made her peace with that. Or at least she has made something that functions like peace, something that gets her through the nights without breaking, and she does not particularly need the world to understand her. She needs the world to stay on its side of the border. The world, predictably, is about to stop cooperating. If you are new here, welcome, and I want you to stay, because this story is going to need you present for all of it. If you have been here before, you already know that we do not do simple stories in this space. We do the complicated ones. We do the ones that ask hard questions and take their time answering them and leave you feeling like something real happened, even if none of it is real at all. Subscribe if you have not. Leave me a comment telling me what you felt reading that opening, because I want to know. And now, let us go into the territory. The first sign that something has changed arrives on a Tuesday, which is, in Seraphine's estimation, a deeply unremarkable day for the shape of the world to begin shifting. She is at the northern ridge. Running the boundary check she runs every third day. Her Panther form a black absence against the gray morning that even experienced trackers miss if they are not specifically looking for the particular quality of darkness that moves with intention. When she catches a scent that stops her mid-stride with the kind of full-body alertness that bypasses thought and goes directly to the ancient, animal part of her brain that was old when civilization was young. Wolf. But not a local wolf. Not one of the 4 clans who have learned, through repeated painful education, where her borders are and why crossing them is inadvisable. This is something different. Something that carries beneath the expected notes of pack and territory and dominance a deeper register. A sub-frequency that she can feel in the base of her skull and the long muscles of her back and somewhere in her chest that she would prefer not to examine too closely. She has cataloged the scent signatures of every significant wolf alpha in the Northern Territories. She knows them the way she knows the landscape, by accumulation and attention. This one she does not know, and that is, in itself, a significant piece of information, because Seraphine does not have gaps in her knowledge about things that might be dangerous, and whatever this scent belongs to, it is extraordinarily, unmistakably dangerous. She follows it. She follows it because knowing the shape of a threat is always preferable to not knowing, and because 6 years of holding this territory have burned the instinct toward information so deep into her that she moves toward uncertainty rather than away from it, gathering data with the steady, methodical focus that her grandmother once described as the defining trait of their line. The Voss Felids did not survive by avoiding things that frightened them. They survived by understanding those things so completely that fear became irrelevant. The scent leads her southeast, toward the secondary ridge, where the territory dips into a sheltered valley that she uses as a waypoint for those seeking entry. The valley is empty when she arrives, or appears to be empty, which is not quite the same thing when you are dealing with a creature practiced at occupying space without announcing itself. Seraphine stops at the tree line and looks and waits and breathes. And after 11 seconds, which is how long it takes for the stillness to reorganize itself into meaning, she sees him. He is standing at the center of the valley, with the particular quality of stillness that belongs to alphas, who are sufficiently powerful that they have stopped needing to perform their power. He is not in wolf form. He is tall and dark-haired, and built in the way of creatures whose bodies have been shaped by genuine physical contest rather than the cultivated aesthetics of pack politics, broad through the shoulder, contained in his posture, wearing clothes that are functional rather than fine. He is looking at the valley. He is not looking at her. She is absolutely certain he knows precisely where she is. He is Kael Draven. She knows him by reputation the way everyone in the Northern Territories knows him, as the figure who unified 4 warring wolf clans under a single governance structure 20 years ago through a combination of demonstrated combat supremacy, strategic negotiation, and the particular quality of inevitable authority that some creatures simply carry in their bones. He is the Alpha King. He is, in the hierarchy that the wolf clans have spent centuries constructing, the single most powerful shifter in the north. And he is standing in her valley with his hands loose at his sides and his face turned toward the autumn trees with an expression she cannot read at this distance. She shifts. The process takes less than 3 seconds, which is fast. Faster than most felids manage and considerably faster than most wolves. And she steps out of the tree line in her human form, wearing the practical dark clothing she keeps in a weathered pack at the ridge, because running the boundary naked in autumn is an inconvenience she stopped finding character building approximately 5 years ago. She does not announce herself. She does not need to. He turns toward her with the timing of someone who has been tracking her movement since before she stepped out, which means his senses are as acute as his reputation suggests. And they look at each other across 40 feet of damp valley grass, and the morning manages, somehow, to get quieter. His eyes are a dark amber that catches the gray light in a way that feels almost predatory in itself, and they move across her with an assessment that is thorough and frank and utterly without the particular quality of diminishment that she usually encounters when a dominant wolf looks at a felid female. He is not deciding how much of a threat she is. He has, she realizes with the particular clarity of her pattern sensing inheritance, already decided that. He is doing something else. He is doing something that she cannot quite categorize, and that inability is uncomfortable in a way she does not have immediate language for. Seraphine Voss, he says. His voice is low, and even, and carries the resonance of something accustomed to filling large spaces. But he is not projecting it. He is simply speaking. The sound of it moves through the valley and lands somewhere behind her sternum with a precision that she finds extremely unwelcome. "You are in my territory," she says. Not a question. Not a challenge. A statement of fact delivered in the tone of someone providing relevant information. "I am," he says, and there is no apology in it. But there is also, and this is the thing that is difficult to process, no aggression. An alpha male wolf of his stature standing in her territory without aggression is, in Seraphine's considerable experience, an impossibility. Alphas of his caliber radiate dominance the way fire radiates heat. It is not something they choose. It is something they are. The fact that she is standing here not feeling the pressure of it, not feeling the instinctual pull toward submission, that wolf dominance typically triggers even in non-wolf shifters, is something she needs to think about at length when she is not standing 40 feet from the source of the anomaly. "State your purpose," she says. He is quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone gathering a lie, which has its own texture, its own slight chemical signature she learned to read years ago. The quiet of someone deciding how honest to be. "I came to see if the stories were true," he says finally. "Which stories? That you have built something here that should not be possible." He turns his head slightly, indicating the territory, the valley, the suggestion of the community that exists beyond both. Different species, different pack structures or no pack structure, no dominance hierarchy enforced, and 6 years without a collapse. Seraphine looks at him for a long moment. "It is possible," she says. "You are looking at it." Something moves in his expression. It is subtle, and she is very good at reading subtle things. And she still cannot entirely name what it is. "I know," he says. "That is why I am here." She studies him. She has spent 6 years developing an instinct for when something is the first sign of a larger problem. Her instincts are currently conducting a fairly vigorous argument with themselves, because every pattern recognition skill she has developed is telling her simultaneously that this man is the most significant threat to have entered her territory in 6 years, and that he is not here to threaten it. Those two things do not typically coexist, and the inability to resolve them into a coherent assessment is irritating in a specific, focused way. "You did not notify me of your intention to cross my border," she says. "No," he agrees. "That was discourteous." "It was," he says, and it lands with the weight of an actual acknowledgement, rather than a social performance, and she files that away under anomalies to examine later. "You will not stay long," she says. "That depends," he says, "on what I find." The problem with that sentence, the reason she is still standing here rather than having already communicated, through the particular vocabulary of demonstrated consequence that she prefers to verbal exchange, that this conversation is over, is that she cannot determine from his tone whether it is a negotiating position or a statement of genuine uncertainty. The Alpha King should not have genuine uncertainty. He should have agendas, strategies, and the comfortable certainty of someone who has held supreme authority for 2 decades. The uncertainty, if that is what it is, does not fit the pattern of what she knows of him, and Seraphine finds, despite everything, that she is curious. She hates being curious. It always costs her something. "Come then," she says, and turns and walks back toward the tree line, and after a moment, she hears him follow, and the morning settles back into its gray quiet, and somewhere under her ribs, something she does not have a name for yet has already started. Whether she intends it to, or not. Oh, you felt that too. I know you did. Tell me in the comments what you thought was going to happen when she stepped out of those trees, because I want to know if you saw it coming. And stay with me, because this is only the beginning. The community at the heart of the unmarked territory does not have a name, which Seraphine has never seen any reason to remedy. The inhabitants have taken to calling it the center, which she finds acceptably functional. It is not a village, exactly, or not only a village. It is a dense, sprawling collection of structures that began as temporary shelters and accumulated over 6 years into something considerably more permanent. Stone foundations under what were initially canvas walls, community gardens that expanded as more hands arrived to tend them, a well house, a structure that functions as both medical facility and gathering space, because the healer, Mira, had insisted on combining them on the grounds that people needed to see each other being cared for in order to trust that the care was available to them. It houses, at present, 612 souls, 31 species of shifter, 14, who are not shifters at all, but have been brought here by the particular gravitational pull of a place that does not require them to be something they are not. Wolves, which is perhaps the most pointed fact, who left their clans by choice or by exile, who found their way to a territory governed by a felid and stayed, because what they found was not what they had been told to expect. Seraphine does not track the demographics with any sentimentality. She tracks them because knowing exactly what she has and what vulnerabilities it creates is information she needs. But she is aware, in the private and unexamined way she is aware of most things she would prefer not to examine, that what she has built is something that was supposed to be impossible, and that the impossibility matters, even if she will not say so. She walks Cale Draven through the outer edge of it and watches him in her peripheral vision, the way she watches everything, with the whole field of her attention, rather than any particular focus. He is careful. That is the first thing she catalogues. He moves through the space with a deliberateness that keeps him from inadvertently presenting as territorial, which a wolf of his status would typically do simply by existing in a space. And he does not make direct eye contact with anyone who has not made it first, which is a submission cue, which is deeply strange, which she files alongside the growing collection of strange things about this particular wolf. She sees the moment he registers what he is looking at. It is subtle, a very slight change in the quality of his attention, a stillness that deepens by a degree. He is watching a wolf and a bear shifter sharing a bench outside the well house, both of them bent over what appears to be a map, arguing with the easy mutual irritation of people who have argued before and expect to argue again and will not let it damage anything that matters. The wolf's posture is not submissive. The bear's is not dominant. They are simply two creatures having a disagreement, and the absence of the hierarchical encoding that should, by everything Cale has been taught and has built his reign upon, be present in that interaction is apparently something that takes a moment to process. How? He says, and it is barely a word. It is more the shape of a question than its content. Consistently, she says, and with significant effort and occasional violence. She says this matter-of-factly, because it is the truth. The territory is not peaceful, because she made it a requirement, and everyone complied. It is peaceful, because she built systems, conducted individual conversations, ejected those who could not or would not learn to exist alongside others, without encoding those others as lesser, and because she has had, on 7 separate occasions in 6 years, to demonstrate in terms that admitted no ambiguity that she was prepared to enforce what she was asking for. Peace is not a default state, it is a practice. It requires maintenance. She has no patience for the romantic notion that creatures simply need permission to be good to each other. They need structure, accountability, and the clear understanding that the alternative is significantly less comfortable. You removed people, he says. He is still watching the wolf and the bear. I removed behaviors, she says. People who could not separate themselves from those behaviors were removed as a consequence. And the ones who remained. Learned. Mostly. She pauses. Some of them faster than others. He turns to look at her then. Fully. The amber eyes making direct contact for the first time since the valley. And there is that thing again. The thing in his expression she cannot name. The thing that lands with too much precision in the center of her chest. Who taught you this? He says. Seraphine is quiet for a moment. No one, she says. I read what I could find. I reasoned through what I could not find. I made a considerable number of mistakes and corrected them. She meets his gaze without effort, which is itself unusual, because wolves of his level of dominance have a quality to their direct attention that most creatures find very difficult to hold. She finds it simply present, simply the weight of a very specific kind of being directing its awareness at her. Why are you asking? Because, he says slowly, as though working it out as he speaks. I have spent 20 years governing 4 clans under the assumption that the structure I was maintaining was the only structure capable of maintaining order. What you have built is a direct challenge to that assumption. I want to understand whether it is replicable or whether it is specific to you. The honesty of this is startling. She does not perform being startled. She simply recalibrates her model of him with the new data point, which requires more recalibration than she would like, because what he has just done is admit, with the measured frankness of someone who has decided the cost of pretense is higher than the cost of exposure, that he came here because something she built has made him uncertain about something he built. An alpha king admitting uncertainty is the political equivalent of a structural collapse. Most would never do it. The fact that he has here, to her, without apparent calculation, is a piece of information she does not yet know what to do with. It is both, she says eventually. The structure exists independent of me. I could be removed from this territory, and the structure would sustain itself for several years, before degrading. The specific shape of it, the particular decisions about what to enforce and how, those are specific to me. If you replicated it, it would be a different shape. Not worse, necessarily. Different. He nods. Slowly. There is something in the nod that she reads as relief, though she cannot immediately identify what he would be relieved about. You should know, she says, because she has always considered relevant information a gift you give to situations you want to survive, that several people in this community have histories with the wolf clans that make your presence here potentially destabilizing. I have not announced you. I will not announce you unless you require me to. If someone recognizes you, I will manage the situation. But I am telling you this so that you understand what you are walking through. He looks at her steadily. I understand, he says. And then, after a pause that feels weighted, thank you. She nods once, which is what she does instead of saying you are welcome. Because you are welcome implies an emotional register. She does not currently have the resources to navigate, and turns to continue the circuit. She is aware, in the precise cataloging way she is aware, of most things, that the space between them as they walk is not quite the appropriate distance for 2 people who have just met. It is slightly closer than professional. She does not create more of it. She tells herself this is because creating additional distance would signal a retreat, and she does not retreat. She tells herself this very firmly, and moves on. What she does not tell herself is that the scent of him, that deep register she first caught on the northern ridge, is doing something complicated to her animal brain that she has never experienced before, and does not have a framework for, and is therefore choosing to set aside for later examination, which is a choice she is going to pay for extensively as the days continue. Yes, days. He does not leave, and I know what you are thinking. I know. Leave me a comment right now telling me what you think she is feeling that she will not admit to herself, because I think you have figured it out before she has, and that is the delicious part of this story. Hit that like button if you are already frustrated with her on her behalf, because same. Let us continue. He stays 3 days in the initial visit, sleeping in the structure she maintains for those passing through the territory who have not yet decided whether to remain, and conducting himself with a circumspection that she monitors closely and finds, against every expectation, free of concealed agenda. He does not speak to community members in ways that imply authority. He does not position himself in the dominant spatial arrangements that wolves of his status default to. He asks questions, when he asks them, in the tone of someone who actually wants information, rather than confirmation of what they already believe. Mira, who has been with Seraphine since the 2nd year, and who has the healer's characteristic instinct for the difference between genuine and performed, tells Seraphine on the 2nd evening that the Wolf King is either exactly what he appears to be or the best actor she has encountered in 30 years of reading people. "Which do you think?" Seraphine asks. Mira looks at her with the particular expression she uses when she thinks Seraphine is asking a question she already knows the answer to. "I think," Mira says, carefully, "that you should be more concerned about what he thinks of you than what you think of him, because you are looking at him the way you look at things you have decided are your responsibility." "I am not," Seraphine says. "You are," Mira says pleasantly, and goes back to her work. And Seraphine stands in the doorway of the medical facility for another moment before leaving, because there is nothing useful to say to that, and she has learned, over the years, not to argue with Mira about things Mira is correct about. On the 3rd morning, she finds him at the eastern boundary, not at the line itself, but in the narrowed stretch of oak forest that buffers the border, sitting with his back against a tree and what appears to be a sheaf of handwritten notes in his hands. He is reading them with the focused attention of someone doing actual work rather than occupying themselves, and he does not look up when she arrives, though she knows that he knows she is there. "Those are observations," she says. "Yes," he says. "Of my territory. Yes." She is quiet for a moment, examining the quality of her reaction to this, which is less territorial than she would have expected. "What are you going to do?" "With them," she says. He does look up then. The morning light is behind him, and the oak leaves have gone the dark gold of late autumn, and he is sitting in the middle of this as though he belongs there, which is something she firmly does not think about. "I don't know yet," he says. "I need to understand what I am looking at before I decide what to do with it. I have spent most of my reign enforcing a structure that I inherited rather than chose. This is the first time I have seen evidence that a different structure is not only theoretically possible but functionally operational." He pauses. "I should have come here years ago." "Why didn't you?" she says, because she genuinely wants to know. "Because," he says, "I was told it was a rumor, that a Philid could not hold territory in the borderlands, that whatever was here would collapse within a year or two without intervention." He pauses again, and this pause has a different weight. "I was told this by people I trusted." The word, trusted, past tense, sits in the air between them. Seraphine looks at him steadily. "Someone had an interest in you believing it was not real," she says. This is not a difficult inference. She has known for years that there are parties who would prefer the unmarked territory did not exist. She has simply made the cost of acting on that preference prohibitive. "Yes," he says. "I have recently come to understand that." Something moves in his expression. Something darker and more complicated. "I have recently come to understand several things that I should have understood significantly earlier." She sits down, which surprises her slightly, because she had not made the decision to sit, but her body has apparently made it independently, and she settles against the opposite tree and looks at him across the small clearing. "Tell me," she says. He does. And this is where everything begins to shift, because what he tells her is not a political briefing or a diplomatic position. It is the account of a man who has spent 20 years believing he was maintaining order and has spent the last 6 months discovering that the order he maintained was built, in several significant ways, on deliberate falsification. Advisors who filtered information before it reached him. Historical records that had been selectively preserved. Accounts of the border consolidation. which is what the wolf clans call what Seraphine knows as the systematic elimination of her family's line that he had been given to read, and which presented it as a minor border skirmish rather than the organized extermination it actually was. Seraphine listens to all of this. She listens the way she does everything, with the full field of her attention, and she does not interrupt. And she is aware, in the precise monitoring way she is always aware of herself, that what she is feeling is more complicated than she has a right to feel, given that this man is, however indirectly, the inheritor of the system that killed her family. He did not order it. He was not present. He has had, from everything she can determine, no knowledge of it until recently, and the quality of his disturbance upon discovering it is not performance. She can read performance. She has spent her entire adult life surrounded by creatures who perform regret and sincerity and contrition, and she knows what those look like from the inside and what they look like when they are false. And this is not false. This is a man who has discovered that something done in his predecessor's name, something that the structure he inherited both enabled and concealed, was considerably worse than he was ever allowed to know. None of this makes the fact of it smaller. None of it gives her back what was lost. She is aware of both of these things simultaneously, and the coexistence of them is not comfortable. But she has spent her entire life sitting with uncomfortable coexisting truths. So she manages. The accounts you were given, she says, when he has finished, were written by the clans that benefited from the consolidation. There are other accounts. My grandmother kept records. She pauses. I have them. He is very still. You have records of what happened. I have records of everything, she says, because my bloodline kept records of everything. It was our primary inheritance, and the primary reason we were considered a threat, because we did not simply experience history. We documented it. And the clans could destroy the people, but they could not find all the records because my grandmother hid them in 17 different locations across 3 territories. She meets his gaze. I found 15 of the 17. I have read all of them. I know what happened. I have known since I was 19 years old. And I made a decision at 19 that I would survive it, and that I would make the surviving mean something. There is a silence that takes a shape, becomes a presence. Kyle is looking at her with an expression she can name now. She recognizes it, because she has worn it herself, not in mirrors, but in the set of her own muscles after long nights reading her grandmother's careful handwriting. Grief for something you were not present for, and cannot fix, but must carry regardless. He did not lose what she lost. He is not her in this, but he is looking at the shape of what was lost, and feeling the weight of it. And that is something she has, in 29 years, never seen a wolf do. Not for her. Line. Not for Felids. I want to see them, he says. The records, if you will permit it. And then, with an addition that she did not expect, and that does something she cannot control to the space behind her breastbone, not for any political purpose, to know the truth of it. Because someone should know, and know it honestly, without the version that was shaped to make it acceptable. She nods eventually. Not today, she says. No, he agrees. Not today. He leaves the following morning. He does not make promises about returning, which she would not have believed regardless. He simply says, at the edge of the southern boundary where she has walked him, that he has had occasion to reconsider a number of things, and that he is grateful for what she allowed him to see. She says nothing, which is her customary response to things she does not know how to answer, and watches him go, and then stands for a long moment in the autumn light, with the particular sensation that the landscape has rearranged itself while she was not looking, and she is going to have to learn the new topography. Inside her chest, the thing she does not have a name for yet is still going. She has been ignoring it with considerable effort for 3 days, and she is aware it is not going to respond to being ignored indefinitely. She is also aware, with the careful, evidence-based clarity she brings to things she does not want to be true, that the thing she cannot name is not entirely a response to who he is. It is a response, in some older and more fundamental register, to the recognition that he is, in whatever she is, the corresponding thing, the thing that fits. She has heard of this. Every shifter has heard of the fated bond, the primordial connection that predates the clans and the kingdoms, and the entire elaborate structure of dominance and hierarchy that the wolf world has spent centuries building. She has never had reason to believe it applied to her. She has never felt it. She filed it under things that may exist for others, and has never thought very hard about it, because it did not seem relevant. It is apparently relevant. She goes back into her territory, and she does not break anything, which she considers a demonstration of considerable self-control. And she thinks about this for exactly as long as it takes to get from the southern boundary to the well house, which is 12 minutes, and then she stops thinking about it because there is work to do, and she is not going to spend the governance of 612 souls in a spiral about a wolf king who may or may not feel the same thing, and who represents, even under the most favorable interpretation, a complication of significant structural proportions. She is practical. She is systematic. She does not let her personal life, such as it is, affect the running of her territory. She completely fails to stop thinking about it, in the way of people who have decided not to think about something and have thereby ensured they will think about nothing else. He comes back in 17 days. She has been counting, which she discovers when she realizes she knows the number immediately and without calculation, which is information she is going to do absolutely nothing with. He comes from the south again, and this time he does not pause in the valley. He sends word ahead, a letter carried by a runner who is clearly not a wolf, and who delivers it with the nervous energy of someone who was paid well and told to be careful, and the letter is brief and formal, and says that he would like to return to continue the conversation if she is willing, and includes, in a sentence that reads as carefully considered rather than casual, that he understands if she prefers otherwise, and will accept that without difficulty. Seraphine reads this letter 3 times, which is 2 more times than any document she has ever read has warranted. She sends back a single word, which is the Felid equivalent of an elaborate social negotiation. Yes. He arrives on a Thursday, which is like Tuesday, not a day she would have chosen for significant events. He brings 2 things she did not expect: a crate of documents that he carries himself rather than delegating, and an absence of his usual careful circumspection that tells her something has happened since he left, that has changed the quality of what he is walking toward her with. He looks under the controlled surface of him, tired, not the tired of insufficient sleep. Etc. Tired of someone who has spent 17 days doing something that required sustained emotional effort, without resolution. What happened? She says, before she has decided to. He looks at her, and the amber eyes are doing the thing she cannot look at for too long without losing the thread of her careful, managed assessment. I went back to my advisors, he says, with the knowledge of what was in the records you described. I did not tell them where I had learned it. I wanted to see how they would respond to the question. How did they respond? She says, with a version of events that was so carefully constructed, he says, that it required someone who already knew the truth to identify where the construction was. He sets the crate of documents down. These are the records I was given as the official account of the border consolidation. I want you to look at them alongside your grandmother's documentation. I want to understand precisely where the falsification occurs, and who would have had access to make those alterations. Seraphine looks at the crate. She looks at him. She is aware that what he is asking is not small, and that what he is proposing, to work alongside her to identify the institutional history of something that was done to her family, is an act of accountability that goes considerably beyond what political necessity would require. He does not need her verification. He is the Alpha King. He could simply declare the official record revised, and most of his clans would accept it without question. He is not doing that. He is doing this. Come inside, she says. They work for 2 days. Seraphine retrieves the copies she keeps at the center of her grandmother's records. The originals are distributed, and she is not going to consolidate them, and she and Kale sit across a table in the room she uses for administrative work, and go through both sets of documents with the methodical focus of people who have both, in their different ways, spent there, lives learning to read the gap between what a document says and what it means. It is, she realizes at some point in the second day, the most sustained intellectual collaboration she has had since she was a young student before everything fell apart. And the realization comes with an ache she does not know what to do with, so she keeps working. What they find is this: the falsification is not crude. It was done by someone with a sophisticated understanding of how records are preserved and how they are read. Someone who knew that the emotional register of documentation matters as much as its factual content. Who understood that changing the specific facts would be traceable, but changing the framing, the language, the surrounding context, would not be immediately obvious. The Wolf Clan records describe the border consolidation in the bureaucratic language of territory management. They include statistical information about the area affected. They are written in a register that strips the events of human, or in this case, shifter, content entirely, so that what was a systematic elimination of a bloodline reads, in those records, as an administrative correction of an unstable border situation. Seraphine's grandmother's records use different language. They are personal and specific. They name the dead. They record the dates, the clan insignia on the forces that came, the conversations that occurred in the days before, when certain parties within the Wolf political structure had apparently decided that the Voss Felids had simply accumulated too much knowledge of too many things that certain wolves in powerful positions preferred remain unknown. The consolidation was not about territory. It was about information. Her family died because they kept records. She knew this. She has known it since she was 19. Seeing it laid out alongside the falsified version, seeing the precise mechanism by which the truth was replaced with a version that justified the crime without. Acknowledging it is different from knowing it. It is harder. She is aware of this hardness in her chest, and she does not perform anything about it, and she keeps her face calm because she is always calm. She has been calm through worse than this. And then Kale Dravon does something she does not expect. He says her name, just her name, Seraphine, in that low, even voice. And then he says nothing else, because there is nothing to say, and he simply remains present in the room with her, not touching her, not making any gesture that would require her to manage his comfort about the situation, simply there, simply a witness to the weight of it. And it is, in the accounting of her 29 years, the first time another person has done exactly the right thing at a moment where it was needed, and she does not know what to do with that. So she does what she always does, which is continue. She continues, but she is keeping track now of the shape of him, the way he thinks, the particular quality of his attention. She is building a picture with the careful accumulation of her observational habit, and the picture that is building is not the one she would have predicted. And she is not going to say what that means yet, but she is no longer pretending that the thing in her chest is not there. Do me a favor right now. If you are feeling what I think you are feeling, which is the very specific ache of watching two people recognize each other and fight it with everything they have, hit that like button and leave me a comment. I need to know you are here with me, because this story is about to ask a great deal of both of us. Subscribe if you have not already. I want you here for what comes next. What comes next is 3 weeks of a pattern that she would not describe as anything, if asked, but that Mira describes, unasked, as courtship, and that Seraphine responds to with a look of such profound unamusement that Mira laughs for a full minute and then says she stands by her. Assessment. Kale comes and goes. He never stays more than 4 days. He always sends word ahead. He always conducts himself with the same careful respect for the territory and its inhabitants that he demonstrated in the first visit, and she has begun to notice that the community, without any announcement or instruction from her, has begun to extend to him a provisional acceptance that they extend to very few newcomers. Not trust, not yet. Trust in a community of people who were hurt by the systems he represents is not something that will come quickly or easily, and she does not expect it to, but something adjacent to trust, the willingness to acknowledge his presence without immediately assuming the worst of it. Devon, The 14-year-old she found at the border 7 years ago has started asking Kale questions about the clans with the aggressive curiosity of an adolescent who has decided that the most interesting person in a room is always the one who seems least likely to answer. And Kale answers with the patient, direct honesty of someone who has decided that a 14-year-old deserves the same quality of answer as an adult. And Seraphine watches this from a careful distance and files it under things she is not thinking about. She is thinking about it. They have conversations, in the evenings, that begin about the records, and the governance structures, and the practical work of what he is slowly, carefully beginning to do in his own clans, which is to introduce questions about the systems he inherited that he has never before asked aloud, and that edge, gradually and without either of them appearing to particularly direct it, into something more personal. She tells him one night about the 17 hiding places and the 2 she never found, about the years she spent as a young adult traveling to each location, retrieving what she could, reading her grandmother's careful handwriting in whatever lodging she could find, and building the map of what had been done from the inside out. He listens with the whole quality of his attention, which is a considerable thing to receive, and asks questions that indicate he is not just hearing the facts, but trying to understand the experience of carrying them, which is not a question she is used to being asked. She tells him more than she intended. She notices she is doing this, and does not stop, which is information about what is happening to her usual careful management of what she permits herself to share. In return, he tells her about the 20 years, about taking power at 19, which is young, which he does not say directly but which she can calculate, and about the particular loneliness of authority that has no peer, about the accumulation of decisions made in the certainty of limited information, about the 6 months since he began to understand the shape of what he did not know, and the particular quality of shame that comes with realizing not that you did wrong intentionally, but that you did wrong in confidence, and the confidence was misplaced. She listens to this. She listens to the way he holds himself accountable without descending into self-punishment, which is a balance she has had to learn herself and recognizes as hard-won. "You are not the person who made those decisions," she says one evening. And then, because she is precise, "You are not absolved by that, but you are not the same." He looks at her in the firelight, because they have ended up by the outdoor fire the community keeps burning through autumn, and the amber in his eyes has gone deep and warm in the low light, and he says quietly, "Why does your assessment of that matter to me more than my own?" She does not answer this. She looks at the fire. Her heart is doing something complicated that she is managing by not looking at it directly. "Seraphine," he says. "Do not," she says. "I am not going to say anything that requires you to respond," he says. "I only want to say that I am aware of what this is. And I understand if you want nothing to do with it, and I am not going to use it as a claim on you, because what you have built here is yours, and what you are is yours. And the bond, if it is real, does not obligate you to anything you do not choose. I know that. I want you to know. I know that." She is quiet for a long time. The fire moves. "It is real," she says finally, because she is not a liar and she is not going to pretend a thing does not exist simply because its existence is inconvenient. "I have known since the first morning in the valley. I have known since the northern ridge," he says. "When I caught your scent." She looks at him then, directly, which is not something she has permitted herself for some time, because of what it costs her. He looks back. The bond between them is so present in this moment that it has its own physical reality, a warmth and a weight and a specificity that she cannot pretend away, and she does not try. She simply looks at it, and at him, and takes the full accounting of what it means, which is considerable. "This is not simple," she says. "No," he agrees. "You are the alpha king of 4 wolf clans. I am the Phalid who holds the only successfully integrated multi-species territory in the northern borderlands. The politics of this are," she pauses, selecting the word with care, "complex." "Yes," he says. "And you govern a system built on the principle that your species is dominant, And I govern a system built on the principle that dominance as a governing framework is a failure of imagination. Yes, he says again, and there is something in his voice that sounds like it might, if she pressed it, turn out to be something approaching hope. I am not going to submit, she says, to you, to the bond, to the expectation that a fated mate of an alpha king becomes a political accessory, or a means of legitimizing some agenda. I know, he says, and I am not going to leave this territory. I am not asking you to, he says. She looks at him steadily. Then what are you asking? He is quiet for a moment, and the quiet is the considering kind, the kind that precedes honesty. I am asking, he says slowly, if you are willing to try, knowing that I do not have a design for what this would look like, knowing that the politics will be complicated, and the system I govern will not change overnight, and I will make mistakes that require correction, knowing that I am going to spend what may be a considerable period being wrong about things in ways that require you to tell me so. He meets her gaze. I am asking if the possibility of this is worth the difficulty of it. Seraphine looks at the fire for a long time. She thinks about 19. She thinks about 20 years of building something out of the rubble of what was done to her family, and whether the building of it was supposed to be everything, whether there was supposed to be anything past the building. She thinks about Mira's voice saying she looks at him the way she looks at things she has decided are her responsibility, and about whether that is what this is, or whether it is something she does not have a word for yet that is larger than responsibility and more dangerous, and the reason she has been so carefully not thinking about it. She thinks about the fact that he knew about the bond since the ridge, and said nothing, and waited and learned her and chose, every day, to be present. Without pressure, and what that kind of patience means in a creature built for force. I am not making any decisions tonight, she says. I know, he says. And if I do consider this, the territory comes first. Always. As it should, he says, and he means it. And you are going to tell me in detail what you are doing about the falsified records, because accountability matters, and I am not interested in gestures. Yes, he says. And I am not going to be warm about it. Not right away. Possibly not for some time. I have been standing at the northern border of an unmarked territory for most of autumn, he says, and there is, for the first time in their entire acquaintance, something that is recognizably and genuinely dry humor in his voice. I am not unfamiliar with the concept of patience. Seraphine looks at him, and something shifts in her. Not the capitulation she was braced for, not the dissolution of the careful architecture she built over 20 years, but something that opens a door in it, not widely, but enough to let the possibility in. And she finds, to her considerable private surprise, that she is not afraid of it. Go to sleep, she says. You are staying in the passage house. The meal schedule is posted in the main hall. Mira will want to speak with you in the morning about a supply question she has been waiting to raise with someone who has clan connections. I expect you to be useful. Yes, he says, and his voice is different, and she does not look at him as she stands and walks away from the fire, but she is keeping track of him, as she always keeps track of everything in her territory, and she is aware, with precision, of the moment when the tension in him releases, and what that release sounds like. She goes to her house at the edge of the center, and she stands in the dark for a moment before she sleeps, and she lets herself, just briefly, without managing it, or examining it, or filing it away for later, feel the thing she has been feeling since the morning in the valley, which is vast and specific, and the most frightening thing she has encountered in a life that has had no shortage of frightening things. Then she sleeps, which she rarely does well, and does well, which is also information. And the morning comes with the cold clarity of late autumn, and she wakes up and begins the day, and it is structurally the same day she has lived for 6 years, and it is, in every way that matters, entirely different. He is useful with Mira's supply question. He is better than useful. He spends 3 hours with her working through the practical logistics of obtaining medical supplies through clan trade networks, without triggering the kind of political attention that would compromise the territory's independence. And the solution he arrives at with Mira is elegant, and uses channels Seraphine had not previously known existed, and she watches this from the doorway of the medical facility and files it alongside everything else she has been filing. He is careful with Devon, who has graduated from aggressive questions to the kind of persistent, half-supervised companionship that teenagers extend to adults they have provisionally approved of. Seraphine monitors this with the particular attention she gives to anything that touches Devon's well-being, which is not quite the attention of a parent, because she does not know what she is in that relationship, but is close enough that the distinction may not matter. She watches Kyle with Devon, and she sees the quality of his patience and the way he calibrates his communication for someone who is young and has reasons to distrust authority that are not hypothetical. And she adds this, too. She is building the case against herself, she realizes. She has been doing it for weeks, accumulating evidence for a conclusion she has not yet allowed herself to reach. And each new piece of evidence is a point against the argument that this is inadvisable, and a point toward the argument that the thing she has spent 20 years telling herself she does not need might, in fact, be something she could survive wanting. The political complexity arrives, as she knew it would, in the form of a delegation. 4 wolves, sent by 2 of Kale's clan alphas, who have heard their king has been visiting the unmarked territory with some regularity and have opinions about this that they would like to express. They arrive at the southern boundary and send a formal request for entry, which Seraphine declines, and a meeting at the boundary, which she accepts, because she is not interested in being a problem she did not cause, and she is also not interested in letting anyone believe that the way to deal with issues related to her territory is to go around her. She meets them at the boundary line with 2 of her own most capable people, and Kale, who she did not ask to accompany her, and who she told, when he appeared beside her, was not necessary. "I know," he said. "Then why are you here?" "Because," he said, "what they have come to say concerns both of us, and they should understand that from the beginning." She had looked at him for a moment, recalibrating again. "Do not speak unless I indicate you may," she said. "Understood," he said. The delegation's concerns are, when stripped of the diplomatic language, fairly simple. They are concerned that their king is spending time in a Phalid-held territory, that this signals a political alignment they were not consulted about, and that the existence of the territory itself represents a threat to the clan hierarchy because it demonstrates that the hierarchy is optional. Seraphine listens to all of this. Then she tells them, in the precise and unhurried way she has of communicating things she has decided they need to understand, 3 things. The first is that the unmarked territory has existed for 6 years without threatening the clans and will continue to do so, because she has no interest in expansion or political confrontation, only in being left in peace. The second is that their king's decisions about where he spends his time are his own, and her territory is not responsible for the political anxieties his absences create. The third is that the hierarchy they are concerned about protecting has never, in 6 years, made any successful claim on this territory. And the reason it has not is that she has made it very clear what the cost of attempting that claim would be, and she is making it clear again now, not as a threat, but as information, because she would prefer this to be a conversation that does not need to become something else. The delegation looks at her. They look at Kale, who is standing slightly behind her left shoulder, with an expression of someone who is very deliberately not the primary presence in this interaction. They absorb the quality of what they are looking at, which is a Phalid who is not performing confidence, because she does not need to perform it, and a king who has placed himself in a position of deference to her on her territory, and the combination of these things appears to require more processing time than they initially allocated. They leave without incident, and with considerably less certainty than they arrived with, and Seraphine stands at the boundary after they go and looks at the line between her territory and the wider world, with the particular focused attention of someone running calculations. "That will not be the last delegation," she says. "No," Kale agrees, beside her. "And the next one may not be as easily managed." "No." She turns to look at him. which means at some point this becomes a situation that requires a formal position, not just a series of conversations at boundaries. Yes, he says. She looks back at the boundary. I need time, she says. You have time, he says. There is nothing I am going to do on a timeline that does not account for what you need. She processes this, the weight of it, the particular revolutionary quality of being told, by an alpha king, that his timeline is adjusting to her. I am going to do something I do not typically do, she says. What is that? I am going to ask what you want, she says. Not what you are prepared to accept, what you actually want. He is quiet, which is the considering kind of quiet. Then he says, I want to rebuild the systems I govern, with the kind of honesty that does not require falsified records. I want to create, in the clans, something closer to what you have built here. Not identical, because what you have built is yours, and it grew from your specific context, but informed by it. I want the things that were done to your family to be acknowledged, in the official record, as what they were. He pauses. And I want you, he says, not as a political conclusion or a fated obligation, but because I have spent 6 weeks in the presence of the only person I have ever met who makes me want to be more precise in my thinking. And I would very much like that to continue. Seraphine is quiet for a long moment. More precise in your thinking, she says. Among other things, he says. And there is that dry quality again. The humor she has been collecting piece by piece. She turns to look at him, and she does not look away. And the bond between them does the thing it has been doing since the valley, the warm, specific weight of recognition. And she lets it. She does not manage it or contain it. She simply lets it be, present. And it is, she finds, not as frightening as she thought it would be. It is large and unfamiliar, and is going to require a great deal of continued attention, rather like most things worth having. Stay, she says. Not in the passage house. Here. She gestures, broadly, toward the territory, the community, the life she has built. Learn it properly, not as a visitor. He looks at her steadily. And you, he says. Not just the territory. And me, she says. Gradually, at a pace that I... Yes, he says. And you will continue your work with the records. I want evidence of action, not intention. You will have it, he says. And if you do something I disagree with, I will tell you so, and you will hear it. I would expect nothing less, he says. She nods once. She turns and walks back into the territory, and this time he walks beside her, not behind her, not in front of her, beside her. And the morning is cold, and the territory is waking up around them. And 612 souls are beginning the particular daily work of living alongside each other in peace. And she is aware of all of it in the precise, cataloging way she is always aware of everything. And she is also aware that she feels, for the first time in a very long time, something that she is going to allow herself to call, with the careful precision of someone selecting exactly the right word, accompanied. Mira sees them walking together. She says nothing. She smiles with the entire lower half of her face and returns to her work. And Seraphine, who has excellent peripheral vision, sees this and decides she is not going to address it, because some things do not require a response, and because she is, if she is honest with herself, close to smiling herself, in the very small and private way that her face manages smiles, and she would like to keep that for a moment before the world requires her to be practical again. She keeps it. She walks through the autumn morning of her territory beside the person the primordials apparently decided was the corresponding shape to hers, and she thinks about the work ahead of them, which is considerable, and she thinks about the records and the accountability and the conversations that are going to happen with people who will not be comfortable with any of this. And she thinks about Devon and Mira, and the 612 and all the fragile, complex work of keeping something worth keeping alive. And she thinks that she is, against every expectation she ever held for herself, not navigating this alone. It is a strange thing. It is a good strange. She files it without trying to fix it, and keeps walking. What follows is not easy. If you thought this story was going to give you the simplicity of a resolution that ends all complication, You have not been paying attention. And I think you have been paying attention. The work Cale begins in his clans is slow and meets resistance that is sometimes procedural and sometimes considerably more direct. And there are 3 separate attempts over the following year to use the question of his alliance with Seraphine as a political lever to undermine his authority. Attempts that he navigates with the particular combination of strategic intelligence and demonstrated willingness to be uncomfortable that she has come to recognize as his primary working style. She does not help him manage his politics. That is not her role. But she is available in the evenings when they are both at the territory, which is more evenings than either of them initially anticipated, for the kind of conversation that helps someone think through what they actually believe about a hard situation, and that, she has come to understand, is its own kind of support. The records are formally revised. This takes 8 months, and requires Cale to convene a historical tribunal that several of his senior advisors advise against, and he convenes it anyway. And 2 of those senior advisors are subsequently removed from their positions for specific, documented falsification of records during the preceding administration, and the tribunal's findings are entered into the official clan archives under Cale's direct authorization. The border consolidation is renamed, in those archives, to the Voss extermination, which is the accurate term. This does not bring anyone back. Seraphine does not expect it to. She sits with the document for an evening after Cale brings her a copy, and she feels the specific, complicated grief of having something you knew in private become formally, officially true in the world. And then she folds it into the collection of her grandmother's records where it belongs, with the particular satisfaction of someone who has placed the last piece of something broken back where it was supposed to be. She also, that evening, allows herself to lean against him, which is the first deliberately physical contact she has initiated, and she feels him go very still and then, carefully, deliberately, not make a larger thing of it than it is, which is exactly right. And they sit like that for a while by the fire, and the territory is quiet around them, and she does not have to explain or manage any of it. The community grows. By the 2nd year of his regular presence, it has reached 800. 2 of Cale's clans begin tentative trade arrangements with the territory that are conducted on terms Seraphine negotiated, which are equal terms, not the terms, of a dominant partner generously extending access to a lesser, and the fact of this negotiation is noticed by people beyond the borderlands who had been watching the unmarked territory, with the careful attention of those who know that what exists there is a question being asked about what is possible. Some of them send their own delegations. Some of those delegations are turned away. Some are not. Seraphine makes these decisions with the same evidence-based precision she brings to everything, and she makes them alone, and Cale does not question this, because he has understood by now that her authority in the territory is complete and categorical, and he is present in it as her partner, not her co-ruler. He has a throne room in the northern clan seat that he uses for the formal apparatus of his governance. He has evenings in an unmarked territory with a panther who tells him when he is wrong and reads with the fierce, gathering attention of someone making up for all the years she did not have access to the libraries she wanted, and who has, over 2 years, allowed him incrementally and with full awareness of every step into the specific and private interior of her life. He has considered, on more than one occasion, the question of which of these places feels more like home and reached a conclusion that would surprise exactly no one who has been paying attention. Devon turns 16 on a Thursday in spring. He has decided, with the complete certainty of adolescence, that he wants to become a mediator, someone who helps new arrivals to the territory learn the particular art of existing alongside people who are not like them, which he feels he has personal expertise in, and which he describes to Seraphine with the combination of passionate conviction and studied nonchalance of someone who wants very much for you to agree with their plan, but is prepared to argue about it. Seraphine listens to this presentation. She is quiet for a moment. Then she says that she thinks that is an excellent use of his particular abilities, and that she knows someone with considerable experience in cross-species negotiation who she thinks would be willing to teach him. Davin looks between her and Cale with the expression of a 16-year-old processing new information about the adults in his vicinity. "Are you two actually together?" he says. "Because I feel like someone was supposed to tell me." "We are something," Seraphine says. "The category is still being determined." "It is determined," Kyle says, from the other side of the room, without looking up from the map he is reviewing. Seraphine looks at him. She is doing the small private smile that only Mira has previously ever caught. "It is determined," she agrees. And Davan makes a face that means he was apparently the last person in the territory to know this, which is almost certainly accurate. The last attempt to destabilize the territory from the outside comes in the autumn of the 3rd year, and it comes from the party she had always most expected it to come from. Not one of Kale's clans, but the vampire consortium she turned away from her eastern border in the 1st year, who have spent 3 years accumulating allies and grievances, and have produced, with the considerable resources available to a consortium of very old and very patient vampires, a legal challenge to the territory's status on the grounds that it has no recognized governance structure within the Northern Compact. This is technically true. The unmarked territory exists because no one successfully claimed it, not because it was formally recognized as independent, and there are parties who have decided to use that gap. Seraphine has known this gap existed for 6 years. She has spent 6 years making sure the cost of exploiting it was high enough to function as a deterrent. The consortium has apparently decided the deterrent is acceptable. She is not surprised by this. She is not worried by it either, which the consortium apparently did not predict, because their legal challenge lands. And she responds within 48 hours with the kind of precise, exhaustively documented counterfiling that could only have been produced by someone who has been preparing for exactly this contingency for 6 years. Annotated with historical precedents, the consortium's legal team clearly did not expect her to have access to, because those precedents are drawn from her grandmother's records, which include detailed documentation of the original negotiations that created the Northern Compact, which were conducted partly by a Voss Felid representative, which means the Voss line has a legal standing in the compact that was never formally revoked because the revocation would have required acknowledging the extermination. The consortium's legal team sits with this for several days. Kale, who has said nothing about the legal challenge and is watching with the particular quality of attention he reserves for Seraphine doing things that remind him, precisely and repeatedly, why the primordials matched them, says, on the 3rd day, that he is prepared to file a recognition claim on behalf of the Northern Compact that would formally settle the territory's status. "I know," she says. "I have been waiting to see if that would be necessary." "Is it?" he says. "Not yet," she says. "But it may be. And if it becomes necessary, I want the recognition claim structured in specific terms. I will tell you what they are when the time comes." "Yes," he says. And Kale, "Yes, thank you," she says, which is not something she says easily or often. And he understands this, which is one of the things about him that she has added to the list she keeps of things she does not examine directly but is grateful for. The challenge is ultimately resolved in the territory's favor, partly because of the historical precedent documentation, partly because of an intervening filing from 3 of Kale's clans formally acknowledging the territory's trade arrangements, which serves as a de facto recognition that the consortium's lawyers cannot easily work around, and partly because the tribunal assigned to the case turns out to have read, with some interest, the historical tribunal's findings about the Voss extermination, and is not entirely without sympathy for the surviving member of a bloodline that the Northern Compact had once treated rather badly. Seraphine does not count on this sympathy. She never counts on sympathy. But she notes it, because evidence that systems can contain people willing to apply them honestly is worth noting. She adds it to the documentation she is assembling, slowly and steadily, and with the same patience she has brought to everything, of how the territory was built, and maintained and defended, and how the various systems that tried to end it were navigated. She does not know who will read these records eventually. She is keeping them because the Voss bloodline kept records, because knowledge that exists only in one person is knowledge that can be extinguished, and because she has, in the 3 years since she allowed herself to be accompanied, started to think in a longer timeline than her own. This is, she suspects, what Mira would call a significant development. She does not tell Mira, because Mira will make the face, but she holds it. She holds it, and she walks the boundary of her territory in the early mornings, as she has always done, and the territory is larger now, its informal influence extending beyond its literal borders in the way of things that work. And the 612 have become 907, and Davon is 17 and ferociously competent, and is learning mediation, with a dedication that makes her quietly and precisely proud, and Mira has expanded the medical facility twice, and is training 2 additional healers, and the well house serves 3 times the community it was built for, and there is discussion of a second one. And Kyle is there, in the mornings when he is not required elsewhere, and in the evenings more often than not, and he has learned the territory in the way she asked him to learn it, with the full application of his attention and the particular thoroughness of someone who has decided that something is worth understanding completely. He knows the names of the 907, not as a political exercise, because he has been here long enough and paid enough attention, and they have, gradually and on their own terms, permitted him to know them. She watches him with the territory the way she watches everything, precisely and without performance. And she is aware of what she sees, which is a king learning, day by day, to govern something different from what he was taught, using a teacher who did not agree to the role and fulfills it anyway, because what she built was always meant to be a different answer to the question of how power works. She is not soft about him. She was never going to be soft about him. She tells him when he is wrong, which is regularly, and he hears it, which is what matters. She keeps her own authority in the territory absolute, because that is what the territory requires, and because she is not going to rebuild herself around someone else's structure, even if that someone else is the corresponding shape to hers. The bond does not absorb her. She did not let it. She has permitted it, instead, to be what she thinks the primordials may have always intended it to. Be not a merger of 2 things into one, but the acknowledgement that 2 things existing alongside each other is not the same as one of them disappearing. On a morning in the 4th spring, she wakes early as she always does, and runs the northern boundary in Panther form as she always does, and on the way back, she passes the eastern ridge where the oak forest begins to thin toward the valley, and she stops without deciding to stop, and she sits, which she does not normally do on boundary runs, and she stays there for a while in the early light. She is thinking about her grandmother, whose records she has read so many times that she sometimes hears them in her grandmother's voice, the precise, careful, slightly wry voice of a woman who documented the world because she loved it and feared it, and believed that understanding was the closest thing to protection that a thinking creature could offer itself or others. She is thinking about the 17 hiding places and the 2 she never found, and whether, someday, they might be found, and whether the records in them are legible still, and whether they say what she hopes they say, which is that her grandmother was not only afraid in the end, that there was something else, something like what she herself has arrived at through the long, complicated route of survival and construction, and the eventual grudging permission to be accompanied. She thinks it probably does. Her grandmother was precise and wry and afraid of things and kept going anyway, and that combination tends to produce people who find, at intervals, something worth keeping. Seraphine sits in the early light of the 4th spring, and she thinks about what she has. She thinks about it plainly and without management, which is the practice she has been building, the ability to look at the good things directly, without immediately accounting for all the ways they could be taken. The territory, the community. Davon's loud, certain voice somewhere in the center. Beginning his morning. Mira's light already on in the medical facility. 907 people for whom this ground is home, because she held it. And Kyle, who will be awake by now, who will be doing the boundary check she taught him on the southern side, who has become, in 4 years of patience and honesty, and the sustained willingness to be corrected, something she does not have a precise term for, because the terms she was given for this were all built on a model of what belonging, Between two people looks like that does not quite fit what they actually are. They are something specific and without pre-existing category. And she has decided this is fine, better than fine. Because the Voss bloodline was always better at building frameworks than inheriting them. She gets up. She goes back into the territory. It is morning, and there is work to do, and 907 people who constitute the project of her life, and she is going to them. And she is not alone in the going. And this, taken together, and held plainly in the morning light without management or containment, is more than she once thought she was going to have. It is enough. It is, in fact, considerably more than enough, and she knows the difference. And she allows herself, in the privacy of the oak forest with the morning birds beginning in the branches above her, to be glad of it. She walks home. She keeps track of everything, as she always has, as her bloodline always has, and she keeps track of this too. The specific and irreplaceable weight of what it is to have built something real in a world that tried to make you impossible, and to be still here, and to have been found by the corresponding shape of yourself, and to have chosen, with full knowledge and clear eyes, to let that matter. She keeps track of it. She is very careful with it. She is, after all, a Voss, and the Voss kept records of everything worth preserving. And this, she has decided, is worth every word. And I am going to need a moment, and I think you might too. Leave me a comment. Tell me what landed. Tell me if you cried, because I will not judge you. I might have. Tell me which moment was the one that got you, whether it was the valley or the fire or the records or Devon's question, or the morning in the oak forest. I need to know, because this story deserved your full presence, and I want to know if it got it. Subscribe if you have not, because there are more of these. More stories about people who build things out of what they survived and find, against expectations, that they do not have to build alone. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. And remember, the records that get kept are the ones that matter. Keep yours.